Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I'm going to do my best now to share my screen with all of you. And I like to start with a land acknowledgement myself as well. It's one that I craft myself. And I think I'm very put it is that in terms of where we join any of our collaborations and our gatherings. We join from many places and we are always grateful as to where we are Indigenous people, and we want to extend our acknowledgement far and wide because we know that we are joining from many different places. And we want to recognize the historical and ongoing turbulence that we face across our world. We mourn the loss of life and the suffering that endured, understanding the impact of displacement, occupation, and conflict. You know, as we continue in this 2025, we have to reflect on how conflict that we see around us and the systemic injustices that continue impact our mental health globally, and continue to commit to stand in with those who are seeking peace and justice for all people. So this is really important for us as we continue to work on the way we work together and continue on how we as a people respect each other and grow together. So thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and you know, caregiving is something that's very close to my heart as a single parent who I call myself the meat in the sandwich, who looks after two children, and as well as aging parents. I'm a caregiver at any given point in my life. It's hard work, but it's very rewarding work as well. So one of the things I always ask my team and those who I work with is how they're feeling. And one of the things that I'm going to talk to you about today is this workshop, and it's very interactive. So I hope you have your phone with you. So if you could use your phone and click on the QR code that's on there. So I want to ask you, how are you feeling today? Are you feeling happy? Are you feeling sad, angry? Tell me, how are you feeling? Because I think it's really important when you show up in a space to find out how people are feeling. I have a bit of a graphic in my boardroom that asks people how they are showing up in a space. It really takes a few minutes to find out from people how they're showing up in any space that they are. But the rewards from that is priceless in terms of understanding where people are in any kind of conversations, collaboration, partnership at the front end, instead of assuming you know. So tell me, how are you feeling today? So as we take a few minutes and get a sense of how people are feeling, I know that some people are putting their comments in the chat, which is okay as well. I want to remind us that no matter what sector we work in, whether it's long-term care, home and community care, health, social care, your mental health needs to be a priority. So let's see what people have told us. Look at that. Tired wins out. Tired wins out, right? Thankful Happy, grateful, frustrated, anxious, productive but tired. There it is again. Sleepy, exhausted, frustrated a bit, but already making my way through solutions. Nice to hear. Deflated, excited to learn, empowered, confused. I'm awesome today. Thank you for that. Hopeful, content, sleep. I'm telling you, it's really, really good to know how people are showing up in a space. It takes a few minutes, as I says, but it's so powerful to know how people are showing up. You can jump off from that with knowing how to then continue the conversation, knowing how to lead that meeting, knowing how to help those who are coming into that space from a mental health perspective, from a support perspective. So take the time. Remember, it takes only a few minutes, but the rewards are well worth it. So now that we're aware of how we are showing up in a space, let's start with 3 words that we have heard over and over, so much so that they have become commonplace over the last 3 to 5 years. Equity, diversity, and inclusion, EDI. We've all heard them, right? These words have become commonplace. So EDI, according to Zoom Info in 2020, has seen a 113% increase in the workplace in terms of executives who have landed in the workplace. Over the last 5 years, almost 40% of Fortune 500 companies have onboarded positions in that space. Also of note, 68% of leaders feel they are creating environments that empower people to be their authentic self. But when you ask employees, they're telling you that only 36% of them feel that they're empowered to be their authentic self, to bring their full selves to work. And when you ask me, I'm saying to you, the reason there's a disparity between what employers or the leaders of those workplaces are saying and what you or myself or other employers or employees are saying that they're not being empowered is because of this EDI word, right? We're seeing all these individuals plopped into workplaces to solve the issue of EDI, to bring the organization from where they were to where they need to be when it comes to EDI. And I believe that in any organization, you can't just put a person into an organization and expect them to be the savior of EDI. That is why here at Empower Simcoe, where I work, I decided that there's not going to be a savior. There's not going to be any one person plopped into the organization, dropped in, parachuted in to solve this issue. Because from my perspective, EDI is akin to health and safety. And if I was to ask you, what do we say about health and safety? If I was to come up to any one of you and say, what do we think about when we say the words health and safety? All of you would say it's everyone's responsibility. And that is how I consider EDI. EDI is everyone's responsibility. And when we think about building organizational systems, we need to recognize that every single person in an organization needs to buy in, needs to understand, need to recognize the change that needs to happen if there's going to be success. And this is especially true when we talk about EDI, especially when you put that at the intersection of mental health. Everyone needs to buy in. It can appear performative when we include an EDI position in an organization, when we all of a sudden bring in someone whose title is EDI and expect them to fix, quote unquote, whatever it is that ails an organization. The pessimism, the distrust, the backlash can create more harm than good. And that just doesn't mean for people who are racialized. It means all people. It means all staff. Every single staff will look with skepticism at management to say, I'm not sure what they're talking about. I don't believe this is going to work. So organizations must first think about What are they committing to? Are they really committing to change? Are they committing to ticking the box that says, oh, we want to be seen as committed to EDI? Or are we committing to truly making change and responding to the change that we're seeing within our communities and also by extension within our employees and by extension, the people that we're supporting, whether it's our patients, whether it's the people we support, whether it's the clients that we are serving, what it is, are we doing that change for the right reasons? All individuals, whether it's clients, patients, employees, need to feel a sense of belonging. They need to feel valued for who they are, and they need to be empowered to participate and contribute without reservation. But that's just the start. But it can't happen because you've put in someone with a title of EDI in the workplace. It just won't happen. So when we look at this definition, we all can define EDI, right? We all can define it. But what I can tell you from the research is that 20% or more of Canadians have a native language other than English or French. And we as Canadians, we are very proud, right? We can see that happening around us, right, especially right now with what's happening south of the border. Canada boasts a very diverse country. You know, we're very diverse and we have over 200 spoken languages. And according to Stats Canada, there are over 70 Indigenous languages spoken by the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. And most notably, as research done by Imagine Canada in 2023 states that while most nonprofit leaders support EDI, far fewer of those organizations really do it at an intentional level. So the majority of them do it at a tick box level. Do it just to be seen or do it just to make, get those awards, but don't do it to really make lasting change. And secondly, organizations that are led by Black and Indigenous people, those from other underrepresented communities, do more to advance EDI. And the reason why this happens is because they have the highest need communities and they also have more to lose or more to gain. So they push even harder. They're the ones that will continue to push when things get hard. They won't give up. But at the other side, that increased expectations are placed on these individuals and they face the greatest barriers. So these are some of the research that we see when it comes to EDI. But as I said, it's not an easy feat and it's not where we start and stop. It's just the beginning. So let me ask you another question. What does equity, diversity, and inclusion look like in your organization? So get your phone out again. Tell me, what does it look like in your organization? Is anything happening? Is your organization on the path of addressing diversity? Let's just say inclusiveness. Is anything happening in your organization? We know that our organizations are changing because Canada is changing. What does it look like? Is there a commitment to EDI? Is there a commitment? And even if you don't want to use the term EDI, is your organization committing to inclusiveness? Is it committing to the change that's happening in the community? Is it committing to the change that's happening? Because you know what? Even if you don't think about the change that's coming from immigrants, we've always had Indigenous peoples here. What's the commitment that's being happening intentionally within our organizations that reflect what's happening around us? What does it look like in your organization? Take a few minutes and tell me what it looks like in your organization. Maybe nothing's happening. It will take a couple more minutes. People are still putting their thoughts down. Start to take a look and see what people are saying. There's some training happening, monthly training, recruitment. There's some including prevention initiatives, little happening. Some lunch and learns, that's I'm thinking that's what that is. Some strategic things happening, some traction, that's good. Party, terminology, so good. People are starting to speak some of the same languages. Portfolio, race, specific, diverse, indigenous, organization, committee, practices. So I can see the majority of what I'm seeing here is that some things are happening, right? So awareness, really important. Committee, great. So there's some, some coalition coming together to start working on it. Practices, strategy, mandatory. So some things are happening. So that's great to see. So one of the things that can impede some of that work are the next two things I'm going to talk about right now. Microaggressions is the first one. So checking one's assumptions is one of the places to start when you're thinking about tackling EDI. So most of you, the next things I'm going to talk about are some of the, things that you probably know already. So I'm not going to, delve into it in much depth, but microaggression, it's one of those things that result from not checking one's assumptions, right? So have you ever seen instances of a microaggression in your organization? You probably have. And one of the ones that you usually hear is, where are you from? And I always laugh about that because I've been asked sometimes, so Claudine, where are you from? And I'd say, well, I'm from Barrie. Tongue in cheek, of course, right? Yeah, I was born in Jamaica, but don't ask me where I'm from. I'm from Barrie. I've lived here for over many, 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 many years. So I always say I'm from Barrie. When somebody asks you where you're from, unless you're with one of your close friends where you're having those conversations where, you joke about things, you act foolish and you go on with your silly ways. You can ask all sorts of foolish things when you're with close friends, right? So you can do that, but you don't want when you're with complete strangers that you meet in a meeting or you've gone to some kind of event and somebody goes, oh, so where are you from? When you've met and you're out of the blue, they're asking you, why are you asking me that, right? I introduce myself and I work for this organization. I'm based in Barrie, and they look at you and they're like, so where are you from? I'm like, really? What does that even mean? Right? So it's a microaggression. Imagine hearing questions like, why do you speak so well? As if you're supposed to speak broken language, like you're supposed to babble or have conversations that makes no sense. Or have individuals say to you, oh, all Canadians are immigrants, which invalidates the existence of Indigenous peoples, things like that, which really flies in the face of what is right. There are many types of microaggressions and they take many forms, right? So there are verbal ones, they're behavioral, environmental, micro assault, and micro invalidation. And I can give you some examples of these that can really help you to understand what they are. So verbal ones, for example, you hear people make really the ones that I just mentioned a little while ago, some behavioral ones. Well, this is one that happens to my son. My son is 6'3". He's a young black man, and he tells me he was walking downtown in Barrie, and he's walking down the street. He's got the hoodie on. Which young man doesn't have on a hoodie these days? They always wear them for whatever reason, even though I tell him, please don't keep your hoodie on, just don't. But he's gonna do it. That's what they do. And mom, I was walking downtown Barrie, and I was walking at these two women were coming towards me. They see me, they grab their purse and they cross the street. And I'm like, Yeah, that's a microaggression. That's a behavioral, microaggression. It happens, right? An environmental one are monuments and buildings that are named after a white person who have practiced harmful acts, right, against marginalized people. A microassault. This one is those overt discriminatory things that people do to discredit or belittle, or those racial slurs, mocking cultural norms, that signal inferiority. People who walk by who they know that, for example, indigenous peoples have their powwows and they pretend that it's and belittle the powwows and do dances that are mocking and that they know is hurtful, not in a respectful way. Then we have micro invalidation, and this one here is also one of my favorite ones, which is when someone says to you, I don't see color, which I can tell you, I'd like them to walk in my skin for just a moment and tell me they don't see color and try to access certain things and realize how much they see color, right? Because color is something that you will see very quickly when you are the wrong color, right? So when we look at those types of microaggressions, you come to realize that they occur and you are aware of them and they impact you when you are on the other side of the aisle, right? So we need to pay attention to those microaggressions that show up in workplaces. The effects can be visible or invisible. So when someone acts a certain way, that's sometimes those microaggressions, or when they don't act at all or keep it inside, is when you think about the cumulative effects. When someone keeps that inside and it follows them into the workplace, into their volunteer life, into their community life, the impact of those impacts people's mental health. And it can be something that is traumatic, makes them sick, make them come to work and they don't behave and or are productive, something that is an employer or a colleague needs to be aware of. How do you combat microaggressions? Number one thing is awareness. If you don't know, you can't understand, you can't help, right? You can only help when you are aware. The second thing is, how do you help those in power change? You got to tell truth to power, right? You got to provide feedback. You got to help them understand, tell them when they themselves are doing wrong and or perpetuating something that needs to change. Walk in people's shoes. Make sure you know that, empathy is something that you have to feel, so walk in their shoes. Don't take credit for somebody else's work. When somebody does a good job, tell them they've done a good job. And then be an upstander, not a bystander, which means instead of walking by and ignoring something, stand up for somebody, stand with somebody. These are simple things. They're not, real complex things, but they make a big difference, a really big difference. The second thing I want to talk about is one of this is unconscious bias. Unconscious bias, like microaggression, is one of those piercing things that cause a lot of pain. And one of the things here at Empower Simcoe, we support people of all abilities, from people with disabilities to people without disabilities. And I have had families come up to me and or my team members, we have over 600 employees, and say to them, I don't want someone of color supporting my loved ones. I don't want a Black person supporting my daughter. I don't want a woman um, supporting me. I worked at the bank at TD Bank, and I've had a man come up to me and said to me, I don't want a woman serving me here at the bank. We've had that happen, right? And that's an unconscious bias, and this is something that we have to be aware of and fight it at its root, because when it comes to unconscious bias, they are rooted in judgments or attitudes that are formed without any kind of evidence. And it's something that we have to dig out. We have to push back against. Some of the unconscious biases are ones that we have actually grown up with, gotten used to. paid, just ignored. Weight bias. How many times have we seen people being judged for the weight that they are? A name bias, recognizing people and saying, oh, I can't pronounce this name, so I'm just going to not put that interview person into the interview pile. We'll just put them in a pile that's not for interview. Ageism, more and more. We looked at how they've changed the retirement age because ageism was something that was prevalent and we were forcing people to retire at 65, right? And it's working the other way now where younger people coming into workplace were being, treated a certain way. Beauty bias. This was an interesting one for me. I remember at one point, Google would have as built into their algorithm, if you were to Google beauty 15 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, the first thing that would pop up would be when you Googled beauty, would be a blonde, blue-eyed woman. First thing, right? So, which shows you that built into the algorithm was a bias, right? So, we have to be really careful as to when we think about bias, it can also be systemic, built right into the systems that we have. And, we are so used to it that we don't even pay attention to it. It becomes like wallpaper. Other types of bias includes affinity bias, attribution bias, and confirmation bias, which are things that, we get used to. Affinity, it's, preferring those who look like us. Attribution is making judgment based on our past experiences. Then we have ones like when we look at confirmation, we look at ones where, for example, someone comes in for an interview and you expect someone to come in for an interview who has on a suit, who's got clean cut, no tattoos, no piercing, and all of a sudden somebody comes in and there they are with locks and they have tattoos or they have whatever it is, and all of a sudden the interview questions go out the door and you're asking them about their tattoos and you're asking them about their locks and you're thinking, why is this person in front of me? Instead of asking them the questions to assess their competence, you're asking them about their questions to assess their appearance. So to confirm your bias about how they look. So these are things you got to be careful of. Gender bias, women versus men. I don't have to say any more than that. Women promotion, women get pregnant, it happens. And because of that, the promotion get passed over and those things are still happening. We see a lot of that in COVID where women were falling way behind because they stayed home more to look after their children who were working or going to school from home. The halo effect, we've had individuals who, because they went to a certain school and you're interviewing them, you're thinking, well, you went to Harvard. I revere Harvard, so you must be a good employee. I'm going to hire you. They still can't do the job. And of course, the last one, the horns effect. If you have a preference for individuals who, or a dislike for individuals who work in, say, oil and gas, and although that individual has great skills, because you're looking for a finance person who has great finance skills, and they have great skills, but their skill set was acquired by working in oil and gas sector, you will ignore that person, take them out of the running because you do not like that sector. That's a horns effect. So these are just some examples of unconscious bias. You may not know the name, the descriptor of them, but we all have them, right? We all have unconscious biases. I want you to remember that when I talk about unconscious bias, it's not intentional. These are not stuff that we wake up thinking, I am going to intentionally turn away this person because I don't want them. These are unconscious things. It's one of the ways that we make sense of the world around us. The amount of things that fly past us each and every day is difficult. So how do we make sense? We categorize, we put them in buckets, we figure out how do we help us to come up with decisions at the drop of a hat because so many things are happening. This is how we do it. right? We categorize and make snap decisions in order to do it. But the result, the unintended consequence is that it creates prejudices, stereotypes, and negative attitudes that towards certain groups. And as a result, it creates unconscious biases. So here's some data. So this schematic here shows that in research done, this is the 50-30 challenge, where we're looking at gender parity 50-50, and then leadership at the boardroom table getting up to 30%. That it shows that from a feeling of anticipating bias in the workplace, that Indigenous peoples feel that they expect bias to happen in the workplace at a higher percentage than any other people. So at 80% compared to Asian at 51%. So that's quite high. And then here we can see that, in terms of workers in the workplace, I can tell you that from an organization that support autistic people, these individuals are one of the highest performing employees in the workplace. But you can see that based on who's being hired in the workplace, they're not being considered as a very productive workforce based on who's being hired. And then, as you can see, once again, women are valued less based on the salary they're being paid. And even within groupings of women, certain women are being seen as less valued than others. So bias happens even within the categories there. So ways to combat unconscious bias. Once again, we start with education, awareness, right? We need to make sure we get to the root of it by helping people to be aware of it. If you don't know, once again, you can't make a change. Second thing is take your time, slow down, get to a place where you count to 5 before you make a decision. Help your brain to catch up before you make that decision. Second thing is admit it. We all have biases. I've had Black friends who go to me, "Oh, Claudine, I can't be biased. I'm Black." There's no such thing. You can call that BS anytime. We all have biases. So just take responsibility. Grow your circle of friends, grow your circle of acquaintances, get to know other people. And finally, think of growing safe spaces and brave spaces. When we talk about safe spaces, we're talking about spaces where people can be themselves and not be penalized. And when we talk about brave spaces, we're talking about spaces where people can come and talk truth to power, and where they can be putting themselves at risk without feeling that, you know, even though they have something to lose, they're still willing to support someone, even though they're putting their neck on the line. That's a brave space. So it's really important for you to think about that. So that was a lot that I spit out there. So I want to ask you to now pipe in. Tell me, how are you combating bias or microaggression in your organization? Because I know it happens. It happens here, even though I'm working on all of this here in my organization. Tell me, how are you combating bias or microaggressions in your organization? And let's see what we're saying. So training and conversations, cultivating safe spaces training, healthy workplaces, self-reflection and humility, like that, bullying harassment policy, EFAP, self-reflection. So education, accountability, bias, self. So some good suggestions here. Thank you for sharing that. So there's so much that we can do within our workplace, but it really does depend on us. We are part of that ecosystem and we have to take control of our environment. Discuss the benefits of diverse cultures in the workplace, many positives that contributes to what we do. Safe spaces don't exist when there are multiple people with multiple biases. Brave spaces put the responsibility of the marginalized people. Thank you for that. I prefer accountable spaces. I will take note of that. I like that. Thank you. Thank you for helping me learn. Psychological safety training. I like that as well. Did my PhD around psychological safety. Getting curious about my own defenses, asking staff what makes them feel safe. Thank you. So recognizing our unconscious biases and reflecting on some of the things that you mentioned there, love the accountability and the accountable spaces. I want to talk now about workplace mental health. And, when we talk about recognizing unconscious biases, it allows us to get more culturally aware. And we need to also look at the stressors that intersect with EDI in the workplace, right? So these are some of the things that bring this all together for us. So life stressors, right? So life stressors, we all experience them. Getting married, divorce, having a baby, moving, starting, losing a job, goodness gracious, driving to work, getting up and getting ready for work, getting the kids ready for school. I could spend the whole rest of this presentation talking about life stressors. But, how do these life stressors impact mental health and how do they follow workers into the workplace? Health and safety risks. When we think about life stressors, mental health, according to the research, talks about a number of these stressors. One is that health and safety risks is the number one reason for the decrease in staff engagement since the pandemic. Health and safety. Number two, inflation. The recent increases in everything, the cost of gas, the cost of food, the cost of clothes, the cost of childcare, the cost of housing, the cost of shrinkflation. Am I stressing you just saying these things? I believe I probably am. The third, burnout. And even before that, I want to insert one in there that, time poverty. We don't have enough time to do all the things that we'd like to do. The things that we like to do, including time with our family and time for ourselves. And then at the end there, the burnout, mental and emotional exhaustion from work, caregiving, and other life stressors. Those are the three things that research has shown that has gotten much higher since the pandemic. Those are the top three life stressors. And with these stressors at play, it's no wonder employees' mental health is at risk. There's no more apparent than, ever since the increasing diversity of the labor force. When we look at how people show up to work, we show up 100% of ourselves. We don't take off half of ourselves at the door. We take off our black hat and come to work with, the other part of ourselves. Or we take off our female hat and we come to work with all of ourselves. So we have to make sure that, when we see an employee who's consistently late, absent or calling in sick or shows up for their shifts and go home, especially when it's out of character, we have to wonder what's going on beneath the surface when we know that this is not like this person. When we look at research, according to Employment and Social Development Canada, 30% of disability claims in Canada are due to mental illness. And CAMH says in January 2020 that the cost of disability leave for mental illness is about double the cost of leave due to physical illness. and that the economic burden of mental illness in Canada is estimated to grow to 2.5 trillion by 2041. We're talking about a huge change in what's going on within our environment. And the ability to support employees with their mental health requires understanding by employers of the root cause. There are numerous reasons why this is happening, right? Employees have experienced or have been exposed to all kinds of things, whether it's abuse of some kind, the history of mental illness in the family, experienced separation, workplace trauma, divorce, survived or lived through a war, or persecution of some kind. I could go on for quite a long time. And mental health is like a thread, right? That can show up no matter the gender, the race, the orientation, socioeconomic status, disability, age, whatever. I always use myself as an example, right? I'm a woman, I'm a Black woman, I'm an immigrant, and I've experienced great success in my career. But given our topic and what you know about EDI, what we've just talked about, do you think that I've experienced microaggression, unconscious bias? Do you think I've experienced life stressors? I think I said I was a single parent. Do you think that's stressful? I have a boy and a girl. The girl's more stressful. I can tell you the boy's a leisure. My daughter is more stressful. I can tell you that. And how do you think they and all of this has impacted me? The analogy I use is, have you ever inadvertently seen a thread on one of your favorite sweaters and thought, oh, let me pull that? And unfortunately, it starts to pull and pull and pull until it unravels. That's sometimes how I feel. And that is how my mental health sometimes feel, that, I pray that no one pulls on my frayed edges. According to research, there's a strong correlation between EDI and mental health. And this link is quite strong, and that we have to think about how we, from a historical perspective, put that all together. Think about historical trauma of slavery, residential schools, the Holocaust, the cumulative multi-generational collective emotional impact of psychological injury in communities and descendants that can impact on those who are walking into your workplaces. How do we make sure that we protect our employees? No doubt all of this came to a jarring culmination during the pandemic, and all of our employees are still feeling the impact of this. They're still feeling that this is just too much, and our employers are struggling to figure out how they can help manage and help their employees deal with all of what's happening. And it's very difficult. So, what goals could you set related to mental health when viewed through an EDI lens? How can you help yourself when it comes to EDI? How can you help yourself, and how can you help your organization when it comes to EDI? Can you take a few minutes and think about that? Given what we just talked about in terms of mental health, all the struggles, all the stressors that you're facing, what could you do to help yourself and help your organization? What goals could you set that could help you? Intercultural competence, supervisors and workers, dedicating time to mental health check-ins, put clear policies and procedures in place, better than mandated training. Supervisors and workers dedicating time to mental health, getting regular confidential feedback from staff to address the challenges they're having. Really interesting. When has mandated training ever worked, right? You can mandate anything you'd like. So once the mandated training happens, what do you think happens after that, right? Confidential is always good. So really interesting comments that you have. It takes us to this point here around data, right? I've been asking you questions because I really value data. Data can tell us quite a lot. It helps you to understand where you're going, how to get there, and when you've gotten there, whether you've achieved what you said you're going to get done. It really does help you to form the basis of your EDI plan. And it does help you to collect that data that is anonymous. Really important in order for you to use that to help guide your strategy. So when we think about organizations and how they need to move forward, when it comes to understanding connections between EDI and mental health, what can leaders do? You know, one of the first things when we talk about the intersection of mental health and EDI, one of the first things that leaders need to do is remove that stigma. Organizations, someone was saying, create accountable space. I am so thankful for that term. I am putting that down on my paper here because I find that to be a really valuable term for me to change from safe and brave space. And I'm going to use that as part of my own learning. So instead of saying remove stigma and create a brave space, it's to create a accountable space. And when we talk about accountability, that's for everyone, right? You can't be accountable with just part of the organization. So create an accountable space. Remove stigma means you need to make sure that the space is accountable, not safe or brave. Become culturally aware, not just can't be culturally competent because that requires you to spend way more time than is available to you. You need to become culturally competent, culturally aware, so that you understand that when you're dealing with individuals, they're not a monolith. They require you to treat them as individuals so that they are treated as someone who requires their specific needs addressed. Really important for you to do that. You also need to train your managers to understand that they are usually the first person that is approached to deal with an issue. So they need to also step up their game and be trained in order to respond to those who come to them. And then also look at the offerings that you have available for your team members. Make sure that they are grounded in culture. Make sure that they are grounded in the needs of those who are coming to them, not one size fits all. Think about those as you think about what you have to offer your members. I'm going to skip over this one here because I know that we need to move a little bit quickly because it's 4 minutes to, and I'm taking you to the end. One of the things I want to say to you is, you know, here at Empower Simco, we use two tools to do our collecting of data, and I can send this to the organization to attach. We do an organizational assessment and we do a belonging survey. And both of those are anonymous. They collect data from an organizational assessment perspective that collects information on our policies, our practices, and our standards so that we can assess how we are, from a systems perspective, applying an EDI lens. And then we use the belonging survey to say to people, how do you feel that you're able to contribute or feel included in the organization or of have a voice? And using that data, we're able to build our strategic plan on EDI and our work plan so that we can move forward together in creating that accountable space within our organization, which is so very important. So I just want to stop there and ask, do you have any questions for me?
There is one comment in the Q&A at the bottom if you just want to click on it.
Should I stop sharing?
I can just read it out. So someone said safe spaces don't exist when there are multiple people with multiple biases. Brave spaces put the responsibility on the marginalized people. I prefer accountable spaces.
Yes, and really like that. I feel that that person who stated that really upped my game. I thank them for that as I was responding because I have experienced that myself. I do agree that a lot of the times it is the racialized staff or racialized individual who has to step up and be brave in circumstances where the space is there and so by reframing it to accountable, that does require everyone to step into that space. So I do appreciate that and value that comment and have actually changed my slide in the moment.
Someone also said staff are worried to disclose mental health issues due to fear of losing their job. If you have anyone
Yes,
on that.
so mental health has gotten a lot more, or the stigma behind mental health has gotten a lot more open right now. So I believe that no one should be able to fire anyone because of mental health. Since there have been some new parameters put in the Employment Standards Act. I'm in Ontario, so this might not apply somewhere else, but there have been new laws put in place to protect workers around their mental health, going off on mental health leaves without having to you know disclose, because that is personal, disclose what that is with so that their job is protected. So I would say to that person that, if they're in fear of a job loss because of their mental health, that they should be able to either speak to someone within, I would say if they're unionized, their union for one thing. If not, they should be able to speak to someone in if they have a employee assistance program that they can talk to, or if they have a colleague that they can talk to, but that should not be something that they should be fearing. Mental health is a bona fide occupational illness, and they should be able to take care of their mental health.